So here I have with my front piece, I've stitched my pockets on, I've done the lower edges there, I've stitched that center piece up there, I've stitched this across and have my hook in there now. The other thing I've done as well as that is pop these little pieces of the hook from the hook and loop fastening, or the Velcro, and they need to go on at this stage because it needs to be stitched to this before we put these two back to back. So in the pattern it shows you where to position them. It's like 1.5 inches in and a couple of inches or so down, just roughly, but the instructions are in the pattern for where to sew those on now. And they're going to take these little bits here, so you can double check. We've already made the accessories. You can make sure that yours, if you've changed anything, are going to fit there, because that's what they're all about. And that's going to sit there, and you've got a little hook in there that you can hang your scissors or some tool on if you choose to. So that's what those are all about. So make sure you pop your Velcros on before we do the next stage. So that's pretty much complete now. If you look at this one here, there's my Velcros are underneath there, but otherwise that's all done. We've got all our pockets on. We just now need to bring it together and then bind it. So to bring it together, we need to put them obviously back to back and line up these little central areas and things. It does mean that we've got zips on top of zips in a couple of places. However, nothing is impossible. We've worked that out by now. I would suggest that you put a couple of holding clips in, and then I think that we should, even though we've done a holding stitching on here, which is really good because it's holding our zippers and things like that in place, I think we should now stitch all the way around, about 5/8 of an inch in, because we are going to trim off 1/2 inch all the way around and bring this down to 13 inches by 27. So at the moment it's 14 inches wide. We want it to be 13, and it's currently 28 long, and we want it to be 27 so that it sits nicely inside the bag. So I'm just suggesting that you pop a few clips in to line it up. Do a stitching line about 5/8 of an inch in. Now most machines have little lines on their stitching plate over here, and this particular machine very fortunately has one that tells me that that's 5/8 of an inch, so I can line up the edge of my fabric and it will stitch 5/8 of an inch away. I think almost all machines have little guidelines on their little plate there, so it most likely has one on your machine as well. If it's on mine, it's probably on yours. So have a look at that. If that helps. If it doesn't have a marking that will work for you, you could measure from the needle and just temporarily put a piece of like masking tape or something on there, just so that you've got something to stitch up against. So I'm just busy clipping away here. Now again, we've got the plastic underneath, so just be aware that that might stick. You might want to lay a piece of paper under that you can tear away, or tissue, because you don't want that grabbing and messing things up at this stage, because we're so close. We're nearly finished. We've only got to put this together, trim it, and then bind it, and everything's done, because we've done all the accessories, we've done the little workboard with a pocket in it. There's very little to do. So I'm just putting these together so that things don't move, and I'm going to stitch around at 5/8 of an inch, and then I'll show you how we get it all trimmed. And then you should still have one longer piece of Velcro, fluffy Velcro left, and that's going to go on after we've done all this bit. I haven't forgotten it. So I'm off for my 5/8 of an inch going around here, and we'll come back when we've got all that on. I'm so excited, we're nearly there. I've got my pieces sewn together. I've sewn in about 5/8 of an inch all the way around, so that it's now working as one piece. Yes, I've got some funny little bits of zippers sticking out, but they are about to come off. So hopefully all your zipper pulls are inside now. Make sure they're inside, because this is going to be your last chance to fix that. It's very easy to get those zipper pulls in the wrong place at the wrong time. So at the moment mine's measuring 28 inches. So yours is probably measuring something very similar. So I'm going to suggest that we take off about ½ an inch at each end. We want it to measure about 27 inches so that it fits nicely within the bag. So that's why we've sewn it 5/8 in, so that that sewing line hopefully will still stay, because it'll help it when we're doing the binding so that it's all held together. So I'm just going to come in there and just go. So you do need to apply a little bit of pressure because it's quite thick, but you can just trim all of that off. And I'm going to turn it round because it's easy for me to cut this way. Now these little zipper pulls might be in your way, so just bear that in mind when you put the ruler on top. So that's at 27 now, so I'm just going to come in here. So because of that zipper pull, it does want to slip around a little bit, so just be careful of that when you're trimming. Do need to apply a little bit of pressure to get through all those layers. Oops, didn't quite make it there. And sometimes you get a little bit of a wonkiness, but I wouldn't be worrying about that too much because we will be binding that, and that will cope with all of those little bits and pieces. Now I wanted to trim it the other way. It is now too long for my board. I'm actually just going to turn my board so that I can do this in front of you. And we've got the same thing here. Currently it's measuring 14 inches, but I only want it to be about 13. So I'm going to trim off about ½ an inch down the sides, and yes, all those bits of zippers can go because we now know that all our zipper pulls are on the inside, not causing any trouble. Now this gets a little bit harder because the ruler is not long enough either. However, we can line because I've got a nice wide ruler, we can line it up this way. Another way to do that would be to trim from this end instead. So we've got this all lined up with some lines on our board. Make sure that everything is sitting nice and square there. And then we can see through the ruler to the lines on the board, and we can trim it this way. So again, we just want to take off about ½ an inch, so that it should be just on the outside of that stitching that you've just done around there. So it's not long enough to do the whole thing, so we are going to have to move it, and we're cutting through these zippers here, so just take your little time through that. And as I said, you do need to apply a bit of pressure here. You could trim this manually with scissors if you prefer, and I'm going to have to bring that whole thing towards me because it's too far away. So make sure you've lined it up nice and straight again, and just continue on that cutting line. So this is a little bit awkward, but I think you'll find that you can manage it without too many problems if you just take your time. The zippers you may have to cut manually because they're just being a little bit difficult. So we'll just come back and finish that off, and that was because I had those bits in the way. No wonder it was being difficult. Just trim all that off, and that's all held in place now. And now we need to do the same on the other side to bring that down. Just get rid of some of this rubbish. Oh, look at all this rubbish. Up so it's nice and straight. Make sure that it's sitting straight in both directions. Same thing again. This time we just want to trim off about ½ an inch on this side, lining everything up so that we can see through with the ruler on the lines on the board. It's so much easier when I haven't got zipper pulls sitting in the way. Because there's so many layers and they're quite thick and bulky, it just makes it a little bit harder to do. And there, I think we're pretty much done, except for just that last little bit that didn't go through. So yes, it looks like it's a little bit fiddly, but I thought if I do it like this and let you actually see me, even though I'm fiddling, you can see that that's just the way it is, and it just has to be got through. I have a sign up in my workroom that says that's just the way it is, because sometimes that is just the way it is. Okay, so there's just a little bit of trimming I'd like to do here. These little bits of fabric are just a little bit wonky. They won't really matter, but it upsets my eye. So that's all ready now. How's that? Looking good. We've still got a piece of Velcro that we haven't used. Let's not worry about that just yet. We're going to put that on at the very end. So right now we need to do a binding right around the edge of this. So bring your zipper pulls, make sure they're in, out of the way of any sewing that you're going to be doing near the edge. These ones are in. There's nothing bulky near those edges other than just general bulk. So I'm actually going to machine my binding on. I'm going to sew it onto this side and stitch it down by machine onto this side. If you're doing it by hand and want to slip stitch it down, I suggest you still do that, because it will be very hard for you to slip stitch down onto the plastic. So you want to machine it down if you're going to onto the side with the plastic, and then you can do it the other way. But you can stitch it by hand if you want to afterwards, but it would be hard to stitch to the plastic. So I'm going to just start somewhere, it doesn't really matter where, and I'm going to, if you remember, I start off with my binding. So I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance now, and the binding was cut at 2.5 inches. So I'm just going to start off with that point, and I've got a long stitch on there. Let's bring it down a bit, and I'm going to stop where that folded corner finishes there. Find my scissors, and now I'm going to fold that over, and just the same as I bind anything else, or the binding we did earlier on the other part of the bag. If I'm binding a quilt, I do it this way. I come and I pivot it and turn it at the corners. So I'm going to leave about a 2 inch or so gap there, and then come back in here. So just keep an eye on it with this bulk. I don't think you'll have too much trouble. Keep your binding fairly firm as you go. I'll just do one corner just to show you, just in case you're not too sure what happens there. Shouldn't have any trouble with the plastic once it's got fabric on top of it. Okay, so I'm stopping 1/4 inch before the end. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to fold it on an angle so that the fold goes right through the corner. It should be a diagonal fold there, and then I'm going to fold it back on itself so that that fold now is right on that raw edge, and it should all line up quite nicely there. If you think that you need something to hold that, pop something in there, turn it around, and then do the next side. And so we're going to start right at the end there. And 1/4 inch all the way, and then the corners again just the same until we get back and tuck that end in like we did on the binding, putting the bag together.